The Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives, Ahmed Wase, has lamented the failure of the executive arm of government to implement legislative resolutions, especially on the matter of insecurity. For greater insight into this seemingly perennial crisis of confidence between the executive and legislative arms of the government, we're now being joined by a former federal lawmaker, Senator Shehu Sani. Good to have you with us, and thank you so much for joining us on Newsday.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure, indeed. Now, I would just like to start by asking, just going right here, so why has the pace to implement legislative resolutions, especially regarding matters of insecurity, been slow or largely ignored by the executive?
Well, thank you once again. The issue of insecurity has been with us for a very long time. And you can see it varies from region to region. Now, the parliament, and specifically the legislature, has a duty as a constitutional arm of government to bring out resolutions, make laws and motions that will support the executive arm of the state to perform their function as an executive. But what has always been the case has been that the security agencies feels more responsible to the executive arms, and that they consider whatever will come out of the parliament as simply advisory, while it's not supposed not to be the case. As far as matters of security is concerned, the parliament is responsible for appropriating the budget of all agencies of government, including the security agencies, and they are also enabled to perform oversight function on all agencies of government, including the security agencies. But what has happened over the years has been the fact that things have gone out of hand to the very point that there is more or less the weakness on the side of the parliament to consistently and continuously invite not just the security agent, but the president himself to come before the parliament and explain what he has been doing and give confidence to the nation on what he ought to do, even if it's an executive session. Over the years, in some 2 years ago, there was an attempt from the House of Reps to invite the president, which of course they have the constitutional right to do it, only for the same house later to recant that he was not invited, and then you have some flakes coming from the side of the president, showing that as if the president cannot be invited to come and brief the nation. So as far as the National Assembly is concerned, it still has a responsibility to continue to do what it needs to do as a parliament. But the problem we have been facing is simply the fact that the president, the buck stops on his table. If security chiefs are not performing their duty, they can't be sacked by the parliament. It is the president that ought to take responsibility. For example, just last year, the Nigerian Defense Academy was attacked by bandits, and a soldier or two were kidnapped. Nobody was sacked, nobody was penalized, nobody resigned. And it is the responsibility of the president to take action. And then it reached a point where even the president kept extending the tenure of service chiefs until there was a national uproar against that for him to take the necessary action which he needs to take. When we were in the National Assembly, that is the 8th National Assembly, we have been seen to be combative, belligerent, and always been seen to be at war with the executive arm. But with the 9th National Assembly, which the president has showered encomiums as people who have always been doing his bidding, there ought to have been synergy and a smooth relationship between the two when it comes to the issue of executing the resolutions of the National Assembly. So you can see it's not simply a matter of the people there are my people, but it is also an institutional problem where you have the executive being reluctant to implement resolutions of the parliament. Many times when we are in the National Assembly, we call for the sack of security chiefs, but the image that was given to the country at that time was that these people are doing what needs to be done, and that the problem is the National Assembly. But you can see what has happened today. Even the National Assembly that is being seen to be compliant and kowtowing to the executive are still not being respected. So until we have a president who is ready to go beyond his cycle, beyond his inner cycle, beyond the advice of people who will not tell him the truth, and then get the truth of the matter as far as is concerned, then he can work. National Assembly are partners in governance with the executive, and they ought to have worked together. You ought to listen to their complaints. Nobody is well rooted in our society as members of the legislature. You have a president with ministers. Many of these ministers are not even known in their own states and constituencies. And even if they are known, they are hardly seen by their people. But members of House of Reps, the senators, and even members of state assemblies are those ones who have no option than to continuously maintain contact with their people. So the report that comes out from them is the reality on the ground. I've seen it time and time again. Members of the National Assembly stood on the floor of the Senate and the House of Reps to tell truth to power, to tell the president that our people are being killed, our people are being kidnapped, and nothing is being done about it.
Yes.
And all the reports that have been given to the president have not actually helped the president. So the president should listen to the National Assembly and implement their resolutions and motions.
You're completely right, Senator Sani, but piggybacking on what you said earlier about drawing people to come and speak in front of Parliament, as is done in a lot of countries all over the world when major crises happen. Ahmed Wasseh, the Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives, he's been commenting on the increase of killings, especially the kidnappings of clerics in his region. He also, decried the fact that a lot of these kidnappings involved the payment of ransom, but they would not hand over the kidnapped individual. Instead, they would choose to kill the individual. Now, he asked the House to mandate a committee on police affairs and, asking the Army to invite the IGP, the Chief of Army Staff, all of them to investigate and, like you said, compile a report and get back to everyone in 2 weeks for further legislative action. With a situation like this, do you think that this would help? Do you think that it's even possible to get all of these individuals to gather and collaborate on a way to find a way to get the executive and the legislative to work together?
Well, you see, I am not trying to reduce the impact of what is happening in Plateau State, but in proportion, what is even happening in Plateau State is a fraction of what is currently happening in Kaduna, Zamfara, and Niger State, where hundreds of villages have been ransacked and burnt down by bandits, where people used to organize themselves as vigilante groups to fight, and now they organize themselves and reach a truce with bandits, including paying them taxes, paying them a ransom without even the kidnapping happen, and getting the freedom to go to their farms and do what they need to do. It has reached that very point. People gather money and give it to leaders of these bandits in order for them to live in peace. So it has not just stopped there, but in some local governments, like in the state which I come from, Kaduna, like Chukun and Kajuru, almost every Sunday there are consistent attacks on churches and abductions to happen. And in southern Kaduna is a clear case of systemic attack on the people there. In central Kaduna, in places like Giwa, you can't go to your mosque as early as 5 a.m. without you be risk being kidnapped. They attack mosque in those places too. This is what's happening. In many parts of Zamfara state and Kebbi state and then Niger state, they are virtually under the control of these bandits. And unfortunately, this is a country that has spent over 4.2 trillion in the last 7 years in the name of defense and security. What have we gotten out of it? Nothing. So what the deputy speaker is doing is not different from what has been done in the past. The point is that the government has not been taking penal action against people who are constitutionally appointed to take responsibility. If you are a defense chief, an army chief, or an air force chief, and if you are heading a battalion or anywhere and it is attacked, somebody needs to pay the price for that. We can't be paid security agencies. We can't have a leadership in this country, and people now have divided loyalty between being loyal to the government and also being loyal to bandits. From Kaduna to Abuja, there are about 37 villages. All the villagers around this route, they know who the kidnappers are. But they are forced to sometimes become informants or compromise on national security because they feel unprotected. So,
all right, Senator Shehu Sani,
what are the state government doing?
You'll permit me, for the brevity of time, to just quickly have your thoughts about election matters, since we're in the election season and Section 84 has been garnering a lot of contention from both sides of the divide. Talk to us about this Electoral Act that was passed. Briefly, what do you think would have happened if we had a seamless relationship between the executive and the legislature? Do you think going into 2023 things would have been a little bit different in terms of several of the laws that were passed?
Well, there has not been any serious rift between the National Assembly as it is today and the executive arm of the state. Almost everything the executive wants, the National Assembly has always passed it. I think with a few exceptions, maybe the appointment of an INEC commissioner and some few things. But every request for loan has been approved by this National Assembly. Every executive bill has been considered and approved. Almost everything has been approved. So you can see there is virtually supposed not to be a rift, and there's virtually no rift. But what happens is that from the other executive side, what have they been doing to reciprocate on what the National Assembly has been doing? Have they been implementing resolutions and motions that have been made at the National Assembly? Well, that is another issue. So as far as I'm concerned, I think the problem is with the executive arm. When they're supposed to listen to advice, views and ideas beyond their own, beyond the bottle of Asorok, and then they will be able to get things done. As far as national security is concerned, I believe that if we don't get this thing right, we're not going to get anywhere. Nobody is going to campaign in bandit-infested areas. So 2023 elections stands a serious danger as long as there is nothing done to address the problem of insecurity. If there is any legacy the president can leave behind now,
Thank you so much.
Conduct a peaceful, credible, and transparent election at Hanover.
Senator Shehu Sani, thank you so much for joining us on Newsday. We appreciate your time and analysis as always.